reading of the situation. Actually, inflation was on its way down when you came in. It's actually slightly ticking back up. But you're saying that you simply don't think the living standards are going to fall. In fact, you're suggesting that they're rising now and they'll continue to rise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm confident that we will see living standards increase during the course of this parliament.
What happens when a politician gets a bit too relaxed? Maybe Rachel Reeves thought Trevor Phillips would take it easy on her, especially on live TV. But he didn't. He cut through her rehearsed lines right away, and what he asked left her completely speechless.
I'll come to what you're going to do, but I just want to get clear on what you think the problem you're solving is. Has the economy declined, got worse, more difficult since you came to office, or not?
The economy is not growing fast enough. I'm not satisfied with the numbers that we see at the moment.
It's not growing at all. Last month was 0.1. Okay, it's gone up and down a bit, but it's basically flat on its back.
And it's not possible within just a few months to reverse more than a decade of economic stagnation. But we are making the changes that's necessary to get Britain building again, to bring money into the economy. The International Investment Summit that we hosted last year.
When Trevor Phillips calmly asked Rachel Reeves to explain the so-called £22 billion black hole, she kept talking about everything shifted. It was a simple question, but it hit hard. Reeves, one of the most powerful people in charge of the UK's economy, suddenly looked unprepared. She couldn't say where the figure had come from, and she definitely couldn't defend it.
You have no fiscal headroom left. Just how serious is the country's financial situation?
I'm not going to preempt the Office of Budget Responsibility's forecast, but the world has changed. We can all see that before our eyes. And government are not inactive in that. We'll respond to the change and continue to meet our fiscal rules, but we're also shaping the new world, whether that's in the defence and security realm or indeed on the economy. I promised at the general election to bring stability back to the economy. As a result of that stability, interest rates have been cut 3 times since the general election. That's a far cry from the 11% inflation and the interest rate hikes that we saw under the previous government. And that's only been possible because we've put our public finances on a firm footing, and we've also put our public services on a firm footing, which is what I did in the budget last year.
This is rather cheerful reading.
What happened over the next 6 minutes wasn't just a bit of awkwardness. It was a full breakdown. Reeves stumbled, contradicted herself, and pushed away evidence that didn't back up her claims. By the end, viewers were left more confused than before. But this wasn't just a bad interview. It revealed something deeper. For people who already felt that politicians often use numbers more as weapons than as truth, this moment seemed to confirm it. The shift began with Phillips's first question. On the surface, it sounded casual. Can you explain exactly what this £22 billion black hole is? But it wasn't casual at all. His calm tone carried a sharp challenge aimed directly at Reeves's economic argument. What followed wasn't just a slip-up. It was a slow and painful unraveling of a carefully rehearsed message.
Reading of the situation. Actually, inflation was on its way down when you came in. It's actually slightly ticking back up. But the point I really wanted to ask you about is to describe how serious you think it is. The Joseph Rowntree Trust Foundation today predicts a huge fall in living standards by the end of this Parliament.
I reject that.
You think they're just wrong?
I reject that, and the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast this week. Living standards in the last Parliament were the worst ever on record. The Office of Budget Responsibility forecast, in October that living standards would increase at double the rate in this Parliament as they did in the last Parliament. They'll set out their updated numbers this week. But if you look at wages at the moment, wages are rising today at twice the rate of inflation. That is very different from what we saw under the previous government.
But just to be clear, you're saying that you simply don't think the living standards are going to fall. In fact, you're suggesting that they're rising now and they'll continue to rise. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm confident that we will see living standards increase.
This wasn't simply a journalist asking tough questions. It was a careful dismantling of a political story. Step by step, Phillips compared Reeves's claims with hard evidence, and the cracks started showing. Reeves struggled to answer clearly, and her story began to fall apart. At first, she said the £22 billion shortfall was in everyday spending. Then she shifted, blaming it on capital spending. Minutes later, she circled back again as if stuck in her own confusion. This didn't feel like a small mistake. It felt like a sign that even the Chancellor herself wasn't completely sure what kind of financial problem she was describing.
Living standards increased during the course of this Parliament. What we've already seen in these last few months of the Labour government is a sustained increase in living standards. Next month, at the beginning of April, people on the national living wage will see a 6.7% increase in their wages, £1,400 more a year. That's only possible because of the stability that we have returned to the economy. And of course, those three cuts in interest rates from the Bank of England mean that mortgage rates are lower than they otherwise would have been. We've got to do more, absolutely, in terms of raising living standards, but this government have already got started in delivering our plan for change.
The real issue wasn't just that Reeves struggled, it was how she struggled. Instead of fixing her mistake, she backtracked and doubled down. Every attempt to explain the missing £22 billion only made her case weaker, showing not just a slip in communication but a bigger lack of clarity. Phillips, on the other hand, stayed calm. He didn't argue. He simply brought her back to her own words and the government's reports. Every time she tried to avoid the point, he gently steered her back. His steady persistence turned the interview into something rare, a moment that didn't just show contradictions but revealed a much larger problem with Labour's economic story. Watching Reeves try to explain her own statements was like watching someone try to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. Frustrating, confusing, and hopeless. Her grip on the issue didn't just weaken, it vanished.
You can say paint picture you've just painted, but there's a different way of seeing this. Inflation isn't coming down as fast as you hoped it was.
Well, again, the Office of Budget Responsibility will do their forecast.
Well, they'll do that. Well, I'm just never mind the forecast. Let's look at what's happened already. Inflation's not coming down at the rate you hoped it was. Interest rates are being held; they're not coming down. The growth figures are absolutely flat, and per capita growth is actually falling. Are you being a bit complacent about where we are now?
I know that we need to go further and faster in delivering economic growth and seeing public services improve. But there are no shortcuts here. It's the hard yards that are necessary.
If you want to do people do the hard yards, you have to convince them, surely, that the situation demands it. And what we're hearing this morning from you, I'm afraid, is one that says, actually, it's kind of okay, don't worry too much.
Things have changed since the general election. We've had cuts in interest rates, not hikes in interest rates, and wages are rising faster than inflation. That was not the case in the previous Parliament, which is the worst on record for living standards. But are you saying, do we need to do more to grow the economy, to address the cost of living crisis? Absolutely we do. That is why we are reducing bureaucracy and regulation. It's why we are reforming the pension system to bring more money into the economy and so much more.
As the interview continued, it became clear that the flaws in Reeves's arguments weren't random. They were part of a worrying pattern. One of the most striking moments came when Phillips brought up a major report from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, a respected group known for its detailed research on poverty and inequality. The report showed that poverty is rising, wages are stuck, and millions of families are struggling just to afford basics. It directly challenged Reeves's positive story. But instead of offering evidence or even nuance, she dismissed it completely. No facts, no counter-argument, just brushed aside.
The situation we're in is you, and how much is the past? You routinely blame the Tories for the situation you're in, but business leaders routinely say that it was your pessimistic messages in the autumn that discouraged spending, your national insurance rise that halted hiring and depressed the economy. Honestly, looking back at it now, did you overdo the doom and gloom?
When I became Chancellor, we did inherit a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
Not
I had to
contested, but anyway.
Well, the OBR set out that in the numbers they published last year. We have addressed that. It did require difficult decisions, particularly in terms of tax.
But that's not what I'm asking about. The message you were giving, and the Prime Minister, through the autumn was, it's terrible, it's awful, we have to do all sorts of things. Did you overdo the pessimism?
No, we took the action that was necessary to ensure that our public services and public finances were on a firm footing. And the tax...
Those national insurance rises haven't actually kicked in yet. They're about to kick in now. Is that going to depress the economy further?
Well, look, the Office of Budget Responsibility will set out their forecast. I recognise that there are costs. Because it's them who do the forecast.
Because you're the Chancellor, and you've mentioned the OBR, I think, now 5 times. Who's running this country? Is it you or the OBR?
I make the policy decisions, but it is right that forecasting is done by someone else. I shouldn't be marking my own homework, and I'm not going to be doing that. Unlike the previous government, I've got respect for those independent economic institutions. But Trevor, your question is, do tax increases have an impact on the economy? Of course they do. But imagine if I'd have done something else last October. Imagine if I'd have swept the problems under the carpet and said everything was fine. Then today, when we face the aggression from Russia, we wouldn't have the additional money.
This raised serious concerns. Was Reeves really taking all the evidence into account when shaping economic policy? Or was she only picking numbers that supported her own message? Her quick dismissal of such a respected source suggested the latter. It gave the impression of a chancellor more focused on making the numbers fit her story than telling the real story. And if the interview hadn't already damaged public trust, the headlines that came after made it worse. Just as Reeves was telling the country to prepare for cuts and sacrifice, reports came out that she had recently enjoyed a VIP concert at the O2 Arena, with luxury seats and exclusive access. The contrast could not have been sharper.